If you're storing these common foods in your refrigerator right now, you could unknowingly be creating a perfect storm for chronic inflammation in your body. And if you're over 60, this mistake might be quietly accelerating joint pain, cognitive decline, and even increasing your risk of serious cardiovascular events. What I'm about to share with you today has changed the lives of hundreds of my patients, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why something as simple as where you store your food could be the missing piece in your health puzzle. My name is Dr. Helen Brooks, and I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician specializing in age-related inflammatory conditions. Over the past 15 years, I've worked with thousands of patients struggling with chronic inflammation, and I've discovered that some of the most powerful changes come not from prescriptions, but from understanding how our daily habits affect our bodies at the cellular level. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, I strongly recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss another health tip designed specifically for you. If you find this video helpful, please leave your questions and suggestions in the comments below. I read every single one, and your input helps me create content that truly addresses your concerns and helps more people just like you take control of their health. Now let me tell you about Margaret, a 72-year-old retired teacher who came to my office last year. She walked in with a cane, her hands visibly swollen, complaining of joint pain so severe she could barely hold a pen to write birthday cards to her grandchildren. Margaret had tried everything her previous doctors recommended: various anti-inflammatory medications, physical therapy, dietary supplements, but nothing seemed to work. When I asked her to walk me through a typical day, including what she ate and how she stored her food, we discovered something remarkable. Almost every food she was refrigerating to keep it fresh was actually triggering a cascade of inflammatory responses in her body. Within 3 months of making the changes I'm about to share with you, Margaret was back to gardening, playing with her grandchildren, and she even threw away that cane. Let's start with something that surprises almost everyone: tomatoes. Yes, those beautiful ripe tomatoes sitting in your refrigerator crisper drawer right now. When you refrigerate tomatoes, something fascinating and troubling happens at the molecular level. The cold temperature breaks down the cell walls and membranes inside the tomato, causing a significant loss of volatile compounds that not only give tomatoes their flavor, but also contain powerful anti-inflammatory properties. But here's what really matters for your health. This breakdown process triggers the formation of compounds that can actually promote inflammation, rather than fight it. Let me explain the science in simple terms. Tomatoes contain natural compounds called lycopene and various polyphenols that act as antioxidants in your body, fighting inflammation and protecting your cells from damage. When tomatoes are stored below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature of most refrigerators, these beneficial compounds begin to degrade rapidly. At the same time, the damaged cell membranes release enzymes that create pro-inflammatory metabolites. Think of it like this: you're trying to take medicine, but the storage method is turning that medicine into something that works against you. I remember Robert, a 68-year-old former construction worker who loved making his own pasta sauce. He'd buy fresh tomatoes, refrigerate them immediately, and couldn't understand why his arthritis seemed to flare up every time he enjoyed his favorite meal. Robert had severe inflammation in his knees and fingers, so bad that he'd given up his woodworking hobby. When we discussed his tomato storage habits, and he switched to keeping them on his counter at room temperature, using them within a few days of purchase, he noticed a significant reduction in his joint swelling within just 2 weeks. He told me, with tears in his eyes, that he'd made his first birdhouse in over a year. That's the power of understanding how food storage affects inflammation. If you're still watching and finding this information valuable, comment 1 below to show me you're following along. Now let's talk about something even more common: bread. Most people refrigerate bread thinking they're preventing mold and extending its life. And yes, refrigeration does slow mold growth, but what it does to the bread itself creates a serious problem for anyone dealing with inflammation. When bread is refrigerated, a process called retrogradation occurs. This is where the starch molecules in the bread crystallize and form structures that are actually harder for your body to digest. Here's why this matters for inflammation. When your digestive system struggles to break down these crystallized starches, it can trigger an immune response in your gut. Your gut lining becomes irritated, and this irritation sends inflammatory signals throughout your entire body. For many people, especially those over 60 whose digestive systems are already working less efficiently, this can mean chronic low-grade inflammation that manifests as joint pain, brain fog, fatigue, and even mood changes. I worked with Patricia, a 75-year-old grandmother who complained of constant fatigue and what she called brain fog that made it hard to remember her grandchildren's names. She was devastated, worried she might be developing dementia. Patricia had been refrigerating her whole wheat bread for years, eating 2 to 3 slices every morning for breakfast. We ran comprehensive tests, and while she didn't have dementia, her inflammatory markers were significantly elevated. When we discussed her diet, I suggested she stop refrigerating her bread and instead keep it in a bread box at room temperature, buying smaller quantities more frequently. She was skeptical. How could something so simple make a difference? But within 6 weeks, Patricia reported that her mental clarity had returned. She told me, "Doctor, I feel like someone turned the lights back on in my brain." Her inflammatory markers had dropped by 40%. But here's something that might shock you even more: honey. Many people refrigerate honey because it lasts longer or because they simply have the habit of refrigerating everything. But honey is one of nature's most perfect foods, and it absolutely does not need refrigeration. In fact, refrigerating honey causes it to crystallize rapidly and become thick and difficult to use. More importantly, the crystallization process can reduce honey's bioavailability, meaning your body can't absorb its beneficial anti-inflammatory compounds as effectively. Raw honey contains powerful enzymes, antioxidants, and compounds that actively fight inflammation in your body. When honey crystallizes in the cold, these enzymes become less active, and the molecular structure changes in ways that can reduce its health benefits. Additionally, many people, when faced with crystallized honey, heat it aggressively to make it liquid again, which destroys the very enzymes and compounds that make honey beneficial in the first place. Think about this. Honey has been found in ancient Egyptian tombs, thousands of years old, and it's still perfectly edible. Honey naturally resists bacteria and spoilage. It doesn't need your refrigerator's help. What it needs is to be stored in a cool, dark cupboard at room temperature where its beneficial properties remain intact. I had a patient named George, an 80-year-old retired pilot who suffered from chronic sinusitis and persistent low-grade inflammation that caused him constant discomfort. He'd been adding refrigerated honey to his tea 3 times a day, thinking he was doing something good for his health. When we discussed proper honey storage and he switched to keeping his honey in the pantry, using it at room temperature, he noticed within a month that his sinus inflammation had decreased significantly. He said, "I've spent thousands on medications and treatments, and it was something this simple all along." Now here's something that might surprise you: coffee. Not the liquid coffee, but coffee beans, or ground coffee. Many people store coffee in the refrigerator thinking it keeps it fresh, but this is actually one of the worst things you can do. Coffee is incredibly porous and absorbent. When you store it in the refrigerator, it absorbs moisture and odors from other foods. This moisture absorption causes the coffee to deteriorate and can create compounds that, when brewed and consumed, may trigger inflammatory responses in sensitive individuals. But there's something even more important: the temperature fluctuation. Every time you take your coffee out of the refrigerator to use it, then put it back, condensation forms on the beans or grounds. This moisture promotes the growth of mold and bacteria that you can't see but that can create toxins. These mycotoxins, even in small amounts, can trigger significant inflammatory responses, particularly in the gut and the neurological system. Linda, a 63-year-old woman who worked in accounting, came to me complaining of persistent digestive issues, including bloating, cramping, and irregular bowel movements that had plagued her for over 2 years. She'd seen multiple specialists and tried various elimination diets with limited success. During our detailed consultation, I learned she was an avid coffee drinker, consuming 3 to 4 cups daily, and she stored her ground coffee in the refrigerator to keep it fresh. I suggested she switch to storing her coffee in an airtight container in a cool, dark pantry, and within 3 weeks, Linda's digestive symptoms had improved dramatically. She was shocked that something so simple could have such a profound impact. She told me, "I thought I was being smart about storage. I had no idea I was making myself sick." If you're finding these revelations helpful, comment below and let me know. Your engagement helps me understand what content serves you best. Let's talk about onions. This is a big one that almost everyone gets wrong. Many people refrigerate onions, especially after they've been cut. While it's true that cut onions should be refrigerated and used quickly, whole, uncut onions should never be stored in the refrigerator. Here's why this matters for your inflammatory health. onions contain powerful sulfur compounds and antioxidants that fight inflammation. When whole onions are refrigerated, the cold, moist environment causes them to become soft and moldy much faster than if stored properly. More importantly, the cold temperature converts some of the starches in the onion to sugars more rapidly. And while this might make them taste slightly sweeter, it also changes how your body processes them. The altered sugar content can cause blood sugar spikes in sensitive individuals, and these blood sugar fluctuations are one of the primary triggers for systemic inflammation. Additionally, refrigerating onions in close proximity to other foods, especially potatoes, can accelerate spoilage of both foods due to the gases they emit. Spoiling vegetables, even before you can see visible mold, begin producing compounds that can trigger inflammatory and allergic responses when consumed. I treated Thomas, a 70-year-old retired mechanic who had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and struggled with inflammatory arthritis. His blood sugar levels were erratic despite medication, and his joint pain was severe enough that he'd stopped most of his physical activities. When we went through his dietary habits, I discovered he stored onions in his refrigerator and used them daily in his cooking. I explained that cold-stored onions might be contributing to his blood sugar instability, which in turn was fueling his inflammation. Thomas was doubtful, but agreed to try storing his onions in a cool, dry, dark place in his pantry instead. Within 2 months, his blood sugar readings became more stable, and his arthritis pain decreased noticeably. He started walking again, something he hadn't been able to do comfortably in over a year. Now let's discuss something many people don't even realize they're storing wrong: olive oil. Some people refrigerate olive oil, especially expensive, high-quality extra virgin olive oil, thinking the cold will preserve it better. This is a mistake that can completely negate the anti-inflammatory benefits you're trying to get from this healthy fat. When olive oil is refrigerated, it becomes cloudy and thick as the fatty acids solidify. While the oil will return to normal when brought back to room temperature, this repeated temperature change accelerates oxidation. Oxidized fats are one of the primary dietary sources of inflammation in the body. The very compounds in olive oil that fight inflammation, polyphenols and oleic acid, become less effective when the oil is repeatedly subjected to cold temperatures and then warmed again. Extra virgin olive oil should be stored in a cool, dark place, away from heat and light, but not in the refrigerator. The ideal storage temperature is between 57 and 70 degrees. Think of it this way: you're paying premium prices for high-quality olive oil specifically because of its anti-inflammatory properties. Refrigerating it is like buying expensive medication and then storing it improperly so it loses its effectiveness. Maria, a 69-year-old woman who had emigrated many years ago, came to me with severe cardiovascular concerns and high inflammatory markers in her blood work. She was meticulous about using only the highest quality extra virgin olive oil in her cooking and on her salads, yet her inflammation levels weren't improving as we'd expected. During a detailed discussion about her food preparation and storage, I learned she refrigerated her olive oil because she'd been told it would last longer. When she switched to pantry storage in a dark glass bottle, her inflammatory markers began to improve within 6 weeks. She was amazed that such a simple change could have measurable effects on her lab results. Here's one that might make you uncomfortable: garlic. Many people store garlic in the refrigerator, and while this isn't as harmful as some of the other items we've discussed, it's still not ideal for maximizing garlic's anti-inflammatory benefits. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, which is formed when garlic is crushed or chopped. Allicin is incredibly powerful for fighting inflammation and supporting immune function, but it's also quite unstable. When garlic is stored in the cold, moist environment of a refrigerator, it's more likely to sprout, become rubbery, or develop mold, especially if any moisture gets into the storage container. Additionally, refrigeration can affect the enzyme activity necessary for proper allicin formation when you eventually cut or crush the garlic for use. Garlic should be stored in a cool, dry, dark place with good air circulation. But here's the real concern from an inflammatory standpoint. Many people, when they pull out refrigerated garlic that's become soft or slightly moldy, will simply cut off the bad parts and use the rest. This is dangerous because mold and bacteria in garlic can produce compounds that trigger inflammatory responses, and these compounds can penetrate deeper into the clove than you can see. I remember David, a 66-year-old former teacher who suffered from chronic inflammatory conditions affecting his joints and respiratory system. He cooked extensively with garlic, believing correctly that it had health benefits. However, he stored entire heads of garlic in his refrigerator, and often used cloves that had become soft or had small spots of mold after cutting away the affected areas. His inflammatory conditions weren't improving despite a generally healthy diet. When I explained the proper storage of garlic and the dangers of using even slightly spoiled cloves, he was shocked. He'd always thought that if he cut away visible mold, the rest was safe. After switching to proper room temperature storage in a ventilated container and discarding any cloves that showed signs of deterioration, David's respiratory inflammation improved significantly within 2 months. Let's talk about something that affects nearly everyone: potatoes. Many people don't refrigerate potatoes, but some do, especially in warmer climates or if they have limited storage space. This is a serious mistake that can actually create toxic compounds. When potatoes are stored below 42 degrees, the starches begin converting to sugars rapidly. While this might not sound harmful, it creates 2 significant problems. First, these sugar-rich potatoes, when cooked at high temperatures, produce much higher levels of acrylamide, a compound that has been linked to increased inflammation and other health concerns. Second, the altered sugar content causes more dramatic blood sugar spikes when you eat these potatoes, and as we discussed earlier, blood sugar instability is a major trigger for systemic inflammation. Additionally, refrigerated potatoes often develop an unpleasant sweet taste and can develop dark spots when cooked. Some people, not realizing the potato has been damaged by cold storage, will eat them anyway, consuming potentially harmful compounds. Susan, a 73-year-old retired nurse, ironically came to me with complaints of increasing joint pain and elevated inflammatory markers, despite following what she thought was an anti-inflammatory diet. She ate sweet potatoes and regular potatoes frequently, considering them healthy complex carbohydrates. However, she stored them in her refrigerator because she lived in a warm climate and worried about them sprouting. Her blood work showed not only elevated inflammatory markers but also signs of oxidative stress. When we discussed proper potato storage and she switched to keeping them in a cool, dark pantry in a paper bag, her symptoms began improving within weeks. She told me, "I was a nurse for 40 years, and I never knew something this simple could cause so much harm." Finally, and this might be the most important one, fresh herbs. Many people buy fresh herbs like basil, cilantro, or parsley and immediately put them in the refrigerator. While some herbs do better with refrigeration, many do not, and improper storage can significantly reduce their anti-inflammatory properties while increasing the risk of bacterial growth. Basil, for instance, is extremely sensitive to cold and will turn black and wilted in the refrigerator within days. But beyond the visual damage, the cold destroys many of the volatile oils that give basil its distinctive flavor and anti-inflammatory properties. These essential oils contain compounds that fight inflammation at the cellular level, but they're incredibly fragile. When fresh herbs are stored improperly in the refrigerator, especially in plastic bags or containers where moisture can accumulate, they become breeding grounds for bacteria. These bacteria can produce toxins that trigger inflammatory responses when consumed. Even washing the herbs doesn't completely eliminate these toxins. The best way to store most fresh herbs is like fresh flowers. Trim the stems and place them in a glass of water at room temperature, changing the water daily, and use them within a few days. Some hardier herbs like rosemary and thyme can be wrapped loosely in a slightly damp paper towel and refrigerated, but delicate herbs absolutely should not be. I worked with Jennifer, a 65-year-old woman who prided herself on eating fresh, healthy foods. She used fresh herbs daily in her cooking, but stored them all in plastic bags in her refrigerator crisper drawer. Jennifer suffered from chronic digestive inflammation and frequent episodes of what seemed like food sensitivity reactions. After we discussed proper herb storage and she changed her methods, her digestive issues improved remarkably. She realized that she'd been contaminating her otherwise healthy meals with bacterial toxins from improperly stored herbs. So what does all of this mean for you? Every single day, you make dozens of decisions about how to store your food, and most of these decisions are based on habits you've developed over a lifetime. But as we age, our bodies become less tolerant of these small mistakes. The inflammatory responses that your body might have easily handled at 40 or 50 become chronic sources of pain, fatigue, and disease risk at 60, 70, or 80. The beautiful thing is that knowledge is power. You don't need expensive treatments or complicated interventions to reduce inflammation in many cases. You need to understand how your daily habits either support your health or undermine it. Every patient I've shared about today made simple changes to how they stored their food, and every single one experienced significant improvements in their inflammatory symptoms. Let me give you practical action steps right now. First, go through your refrigerator today and identify these 9 items: tomatoes, bread, honey, coffee, onions, olive oil, garlic, potatoes, and sensitive fresh herbs. Create proper storage spaces for these foods outside your refrigerator. For tomatoes and herbs, a countertop spot away from direct sunlight. For bread, a bread box or paper bag in a cool cupboard. For honey, coffee, and olive oil, a dark pantry shelf. For onions, garlic, and potatoes, a cool, dry, dark place with good ventilation, stored separately from each other. Second, examine these foods before you use them. Even with proper storage, if something shows signs of mold, unusual softness, or off odors, discard it completely. Don't try to cut around the damage. The inflammatory compounds produced by spoilage often penetrate far beyond what you can see. Third, buy smaller quantities more frequently. I know this goes against the current trend of bulk buying and meal prepping far in advance, but for many of these items, freshness is crucial for maximizing their anti-inflammatory benefits and minimizing risks. Fourth, and this is crucial, talk to your doctor about your inflammatory symptoms. The changes I've discussed today can make a significant difference, but they're part of a comprehensive approach to managing inflammation, not a replacement for medical care. If you're experiencing chronic pain, fatigue, digestive issues, or other symptoms of inflammation, you need a proper evaluation to rule out serious underlying conditions. Fifth, be patient with yourself. These changes might seem small, but they require breaking habits you've had for decades. Start with 1 or 2 items that you use most frequently. Master those storage changes, and then move on to others. Sustainable change happens gradually. I also want you to understand something important. Inflammation isn't always bad. Acute inflammation is your body's natural and necessary response to injury or infection. The problem is chronic, low-grade inflammation that persists for months or years, slowly damaging your tissues, your joints, your blood vessels, and even your brain. This is the type of inflammation that improper food storage can contribute to, and this is the type we're trying to prevent. Your body is incredibly resilient and responsive. I've seen patients in their 70s and 80s make dietary and lifestyle changes and experience improvements they thought were impossible. Margaret, who we talked about at the beginning, is now 83 and still tends her garden daily. Robert makes his pasta sauce and works on woodworking projects. Patricia volunteers at her community center, sharp as ever. These aren't miracles. They're the natural result of removing obstacles that were preventing their bodies from healing. Remember, every meal is an opportunity to fight inflammation or fuel it. Every storage decision you make about your food matters. Your body is listening to every choice you make, responding at the cellular level to the quality and condition of the food you provide it. I want to encourage you to take this information seriously, but don't let it overwhelm you. Start today with one simple change. Take those tomatoes out of your refrigerator, move that bread to a bread box, put your honey in the pantry. Each small change is a step toward reducing inflammation and improving your quality of life. If you found this information valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with friends or family members who might benefit from this information. And most importantly, leave a comment below telling me which of these 9 foods you've been storing incorrectly. I read every comment, and your questions and experiences help me create content that truly serves your needs. Remember, you have more control over your health than you might think. Simple changes in how you store your food can have profound effects on inflammation, pain levels, energy, and overall well-being. You deserve to feel your best, and I'm here to help you understand how to make that happen. Take care of yourself, store your food wisely, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue exploring practical ways to optimize your health as you age. Until then, make every bite count, and remember, where you store your food is just as important as what you eat.